Hi, today we will start with Unit 4. It's energy and matter in ecosystems. We have studied about ecosystems already in the lessons and the units before. However, today we are going to talk about the interaction in the ecosystem, about how do matter and energy move through the ecosystem. You will see it is another kind of interaction in the ecosystem. Mainly, we will talk about the food chain. If you look at this village, it's a small village in a forest area, but you can see a hyena that is going around the houses, most probably to get food. And we think to ourselves about this hyena. Who's the bad guy and who's the good guy here? Is the hyena the dangerous part of this picture or the people? And this question, I will leave it till the end of the lesson to answer it. Okay? So you keep on thinking about why does the hyena come to the houses? Why does it come to the places where people live? Is it really wild to come and attack people? Mm, I don't know. We will answer it later. In the ecosystem, we will have four different pictures: the sun, the owl, the rabbit, the grass. Is there any relation between them? Think about it. Do we have any relation between them? Which one depends on the other and why? Usually, these organisms are arranged in a way that they depend on each other for food and for energy. The sun is the source of energy in the ecosystem. Grass are producers. They will use the sun in order to make their own food. They are producers because they are able to make their own food and they don't depend on other organisms for food. The rabbit is a consumer because it eats other organisms. Here the rabbit eats the grass. The owl is another consumer, but it eats the rabbit and not the grass in order to get the food. But if you look at the picture, you can see the red arrow. The red arrow shows that the energy is moving from the sun to the owl. How? Because the sun provides the plants with light. The plants will use light to make their own food. The rabbit will use the plants for food and they will take the energy from the sun by the food they eat. Then the rabbit themselves will pass the energy from the sun to the owl because the owl eats the rabbit. So these pictures can be organized according to the flow of energy because one organism depends on other in order to get the food they need. On page 225, there is a picture of the tundra. The tundra, it's a place, we call it a biome, found on the North Pole and the South Pole. Usually it is about 9 months per year, snow and ice. Only 3 months or even less, we have what they call it summer, but it's a cold summer. When the winter ends, the ice will melt and the summer season will start, but it will not be enough in order to grow tall plants or trees. That's why most of the plants you can see them are short in order to adapt themselves to the cold weather and because the growing season is very short. There are many plants and animals that live in the tundra. You have them in the picture. Mainly you have the caribou, the reindeer, the polar bear, the Arctic fox, the Arctic hare or rabbit, the Arctic owl, and many others. On page 225, they are helping you to understand how does the energy move in the ecosystem in the tundra. It's a place that we said it is very cold most of the year. And they wrote you a brief description of every picture you have on this page. They told that the sun, it is the source of energy for all the producers. The caribou, it's an animal that looks like a deer and it's mostly like the deer that carries the carriage of Santa Claus. We call it a caribou. The other one is called the reindeer. It's much close to it, but they are not really deer. The reindeer mouse, it's a kind of a producer. Wolves, they are predators. Arctic gulls, they are kind of birds that eat the dead bodies. Fungi and bacteria, they are like decomposers. They break down dead bodies and return important minerals back to the soil. So we have to classify the organisms in the ecosystem according to the way they get the food. We have the producers like the reindeer mouse. They use energy from the sun to make their own food. We have the consumers like the caribou or like the wolf or the gull or many others. They depend on other organisms to get their food. They eat plants, they eat animals or others. And we have the decomposers that break down the bodies of dead organisms and return important minerals and nutrients back to the soil. Later, the plants can use them to make their own bodies. How can you classify the consumers in an ecosystem? You have seen different animals that we call consumers. But do they eat the same kind of food? No, they don't. So, we classify consumers usually according to the food that they eat. I will start with the herbivores. Herbivores like the caribou, they eat only plants or they eat only producers. Like the caribou, like the deer, the giraffe, the sheep, the horse, the camel, all of them are herbivores because they depend only on plants or producers for food. We classify consumers also as carnivores, like the wolf. The wolf eats meat only or it eats other consumers. Um, we have many examples also like the lion, like the frog, like crocodile, tiger, and some kinds of fish like the shark. They are carnivores because they eat only meat or other consumers. The omnivores. Omnivores, they are another group of consumers because they can eat both plants and animals at the same time. They depend on their food on producers and consumers like the Arctic fox or like the foxes. Usually, they depend on fruits mostly in fall or autumn, and they depend on consumers on other seasons. We have many examples of omnivores, mainly human. We are omnivores. We have the bear. It's an omnivore. The raccoon is an omnivore. And you have other examples. At last, we have the scavengers. You remember when I started my video today with the hyena? I have put it on purpose because I wanted to tell you that the hyena is a scavenger. It's like the Arctic gull. They depend on dead bodies for food. They eat dead bodies. In fact, they clean our environment from dead bodies before the decomposers come and break them. So that's why sometimes the hyena come to the houses not because they want to attack people, because we destroyed their houses, their habitats, and they want to come to get food. And usually they get it from the garbage. That's why you find it around the garbage rather than attacking the houses. And sometimes the people kill them, which is very bad because the scavengers they help to clean our environment. So consumers are classified into herbivores, carnivores, omnivores, and scavengers depending on the food they eat. What are decomposers in the ecosystem and what is their role? Decomposers, they are organisms that can break down dead bodies and return important nutrients back to the environment, especially to the soil. That's why they are very important to the plants and other organisms. Decomposers can be fungi like mushroom. They can be bacteria, they can be animals also like the earthworm. All of them, they have one job, which is break down dead bodies. Don't get confused with the scavengers. Scavengers are consumers, while as decomposers are not. They break down dead bodies. They don't eat dead bodies, they break it down. Scavengers eat dead bodies. That's the difference. So let's now organize the organisms and the sun that is found on page 225. So the arrow shows the flow of energy from the sun till the end. So the sun is the source of energy and all the organisms depend on it to get the energy they need or the food they need. Who depends on the sun? The reindeer moth because it's a producer. It takes energy from the sun to make its own food. The caribou depends on the producer, so it is an herbivore. Since it is the first consumer in the picture, I call it primary consumer or the first consumer. Who depends on the caribou? The wolf. The wolf depends on the caribou, so it eats other consumers. The wolf is a carnivore. It is the second animal we can see in the chain we are looking at. That's why we call it the secondary consumer. At last, we have the decomposers or scavengers. But don't forget, the decomposer or scavenger, their place is not necessarily at the end because maybe the caribou dies. So the scavenger or the mushroom will eat it or break it down before the wolf or the reindeer moth. Maybe the wolf dies first and the seagull or the Arctic gull and the mushroom will get rid of the body also. Or maybe the reindeer moth as well, it can die and its body can be broken down by decomposers or scavengers. So Don't forget, the decomposer breaks down dead bodies while as the scavenger eats dead bodies. It's a consumer. And according to the arrow, the energy from the sun flows in the ecosystem from the producer to the primary consumer to the secondary consumer to the decomposers or scavengers which can be found at any point or at any level in the ecosystem. By definition, what is a food chain? A food chain is the transfer of energy and matter from one organism to the next in an ecosystem. You have to memorize this definition. Now, what would happen if one chain was lost? For example, I have put for you the same food chain. Which one is missing? The producer, the reindeer moss. What do you think will happen to this food chain? Can the caribou get the food it needs? No, because it's an herbivore, it's a primary consumer, and it has no food anymore. So, what happens to it? Usually, it will go to another place to get its food, or it might die. If it goes to another place or it dies, what would happen to the wolf? The wolf would not be able to find its food, so it will go to another place or it will die. So, can we say that the food chain stays as a community here? No, because most of the organisms will die if one chain only is lost. That's why I always repeat, take care of your environment. Killing organisms means that you are breaking the chain, you are causing many other animals to die. Now, what would happen if another organism was lost? In this slide, which animal was lost? It's the primary consumer, the herbivore, the caribou. So, can the wolf find its food? No. What would happen to it? It would go to another place or it will die. What will happen to the reindeer moss? The reindeer moss will have no animal to eat them. So their population start to get bigger and bigger, bigger and bigger in such a way that it will not be too healthy to the tundra environment. So remember, we should not break any chain of the food chain because all the organisms will be affected. Now, I will give you a story to explain what happens to populations. In the tundra, we had so many reindeer moss. So the caribou could find enough food. They started to grow and reproduce, and their numbers started to increase one by one. And we had a very big population of caribou because they have enough food to eat. Who's going to increase because we have too much caribou? You got it right, the wolves. Many wolves will find too much caribou to eat and they will start to grow and reproduce. But since the caribou are in a very big number, the amount of reindeer must start to become less. So the reindeer moss now is a limited resource. It's not enough for all the caribou. So some caribou will die and some caribou will go to another place, but the population will get less. When the population of the caribou will get less, also the population of wolves will get less. Now it's your turn to become a friend to the environment, kind to the environment. Whatever you do, keep on thinking that you should not break the chains in the environment because we have many food chains. If you break one, it means that you have broken the whole chain and all the organisms are affected. Even if you pull out one flower, it means that you are affecting the whole environment. How can you be kind to your environment? Anything that you can do and try to keep the environment in shape, no missing chains, it means that you understood the lesson. So you have to take pictures of yourself or make a video of yourself taking care of the environment, maybe watering the plant, maybe collecting garbage, maybe not allowing the people around you to hunt birds, maybe not to kill the insects around the house because they are part of the bigger environment. So, science is not to memorize and not to give the correct answers to the questions. Science is doing the right thing to the environment. I'll be waiting to see you how friendly you are to your environment. Bye bye.